Thank you so much for coming. It's such a pleasure to have these two wonderful collectors. We do apologize for Patricia. In fact, I think what Hidi said, I think after each of our panelists has presented their collection, I will say a few words about Patricia's collection. We're so sorry she's not here. But I know her quite well. I've interviewed her a number of times and I've been to see the collection. So I'll just tell you a little bit about her motivations once we've heard from our two distinguished panelists. So I'm going to start with the introductions, and I'm going to start on my immediate left, Joop van Caldenborgh, who's an industrialist. But of course he's here not because he's an industrialist, but because he has a collection. He doesn't like to put a number on it, and I can understand why, but it is certainly one of the largest private collections in Holland. It's called the Caldenborgh collection, and it's in a museum.
It's called the Voorlinden collection.
Sorry, Voorlinden collection. It was called the Caldenborgh collection.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And it's in a private museum in the west of Holland. And it's not only a collection that's in a museum, but there's also an enormous 100-acre, I hope I'm right, art park around it.
No, that's quite close.
We're still there. I'm getting closer.
No,
Good.
no, this is 100 acres is okay.
Okay. It's a collection of modern art and contemporary art, and you have some amazing pieces, for example, by Richard Serra, James Turrell, and so on. To the left of Joop, we have Harald Falckenberg, who I'm sure many of you also know. Originally trained as a lawyer and as a historian, he also has a doctorate, or a PhD as we call it in English, in international insurance law. It's also a very large collection, which is on show in Hamburg. Okay? So what I'm going to do first is to ask first Joop and then Harald to talk a bit about their collecting and their collection, and then we'll move to a discussion about it on various points that we've already discussed. After each of them has presented their collection, I will talk a little bit about Patricia's collection as well. So, Joop, over to you.
When I was 16, I bought my first piece of art. That is not, you're not a collector by then. I just bought a piece of art because I could draw quite well and I had interest in it. And I went to a gallery called Ores, the back reading of Zero, and I bought my first work of Jan Schoonhoven. And as from then, I bought once in a while. I was still at school, so I didn't have much money. It took quite a while before I could call myself, say, a collector. But I remember when I was somewhere in my 40s that my wife said to me, "Don't you think it's strange that all these paintings are in rows against the wall, you cannot even hang them?" And then I realized I'm a collector. And that's not something to be very proud of, because it means you like to hoard things. And in Holland, that is not something people are proud of. Only later, when you share it with the public, you can say, well, okay, I did it for something. But that took for me quite a time. When people asked me, when we started to make exhibitions in museums and so, asked me, will there be ever a museum? I always said no, since I thought we had more than enough museums and very good museums in the Netherlands, so nobody needed me to build another museum. And so slowly the collection grew, and at a certain stage, but I was already in my 70s, that I realized, what will I do with it? And the funny thing is, whatever you collect or whatever you have shown, not many of our museums in the Netherlands showed a very big interest in having the collection. Maybe because it, in their opinion, was not so good, I don't know. I was 18 years chairman of the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum. They once made an exhibition with our collection, but nobody ever asked, what are you going to do with it? I thought it was strange, but that's what it was. I was afraid they would ask. Then I was 10 years chairman of the De Hague Museum, the gemeentemuseum now called Kunstmuseum. They were not very original choosing a new name, I think. But anyway, they asked once, but then I had already some plans. And I realized that if you give your collection to the museum, they may be 1 week very nice to you and happy with you and celebrate you. But after that, they will put it in the vaults somewhere in the basement. And if you're unlucky, it will never appear again. And then slowly the idea of building our own museum happened. But I was rather old already, nearly 75 when I started to think of it. And it happened because my son, who ran the company, asked me, maybe to keep me away, I don't know, but asked me to make an exhibition in Rotterdam in the Kunsthal in 2010. And Susan, the director, and now the director of the museum, and I enjoyed doing that so much, making the exhibition. I talked with the director of the museum, or of the Kunsthal, and I said, well, we only do it if the two of us are allowed to make the exhibition, not your curators. We do it. That was difficult for them, but they accepted. We called that exhibition I Promise to Love You, after work from Tracy Emin. And I remember at the opening, the director of the museum, of the Kunsthal, said very nice things about the exhibition and asked me whether I would make next year another exhibition. And I said, that is maybe a nice idea. We will call it I Promise to Love You Too. And, but that never happened, because then immediately we started to make plans to build a museum.
For your own museum?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So, Harald, can you please give us as well your collecting journey and how you came to make your museum?
I think I'm a little bit younger than you. But I started with 50, that I was rather young. So it was a mild lifetime crisis, yes, a positive lifetime crisis, where I was in business, and I said to myself, okay, was it this? What shall I do, and what is my interest? And so I engaged myself in buying art, and not only buying art, but involved in institutions as well, Kunstverein and museums also, and composed also international museums later. And so it was built up by that. But then we were, it's really the first, I started in 94 when I was 50 years, 1994 when I was 50 years old, or 1 year later, 51 years old. And but the real beginning was 10 years later. Yes, you have to learn first. If you start to buy art, it's difficult and not so good if you only buy art according to your taste. You should know about it, like you should know something about business if you want to make business in the end of the day, to differ between good art and not so good art, and you can't do it by yourself. So you have to be involved and listen to artists and listen to intelligent people and to make talks. And that was for me the prime effect, that I had very different talks from my business with people with personal conflicts and personal setups. Yes, and as he said, sometime there was as we say, if the walls are no longer capable to take up the pictures, then you have to make the decision to do something else. Yes. And that was around 2001, and then I decided to do it by myself, and that was a time, 2001, which is very similar to the time today, by the way. That is 24 years, 23 years ago, and that was a very anti-capitalistic period. And the museums didn't want to have any collections. That was too expensive, and it turned out more and more that nearly 80% of the visitors of museums go into exhibitions and not into the collection. So the collection was the birth of a museum, is the collection. But today, 80% and more, I think, all over the world, go into the exhibitions. That's a very important point for us private collectors, because the collection itself, although it was the birth of a museum, is neglected today. And I like to work together with the people who are neglected. I'm a big sense for neglected persons, yes, and to cooperate with museums, but not with the exhibition part. That is up to Prada and other organizations who want to make more movement for the market. And they need, the exhibitions today are organized by luxury accessories like Arnaud and Pinault and whatsoever, the whole influence, but not by the people who work in art. So that is a very important point. And I always cooperated and subsidized and worked together with the people in the background of the museum.
One of the things that I omitted to say is that your collection is constituted essentially of post-war American-German artists and as you said, sort of the rebellious youth of the time.
Yeah, so if you want to do something quite different from your business, it's always a little bit rebellious. and to buy art is the biggest money destruction machine. Yes, you see it here on the fair. Yes, and that is something different, you can say. I don't blame anyone to do this or that. I just try to describe how it is. Yes,
but that's your...
Yeah, that's my position.
Yes, plus
I don't
artists...
have messages for anyone.
You don't have
messages. I just
messages.
do what I think is right for me, and others can follow or not follow. I'm quite free to accept anyone to do what he wants.
Okay.
But it's a very important point that the museums today, that was in 2001, that was really a time when there was a coming up, the time when all the biennales and triennales came up. That was a different generation. The curatorship came up, and there was the exhibition came more and more into the play. Yes, and it was given up naturally before already, the exclusiveness of art. If you look back in the 50s and before, then art was very exclusive, as it partly here in TFAF, but fortunately they have all kinds of parts of, you can also have modern or contemporary art, as we say, but it is, this exclusivity was given up in the 60s already with the pop art in America, and where art were thrown from the high throne of being holy art.
Elitist art.
Yes.
Yes.
And there was pushed down from the columns and put into the normal popularity. And so naturally, suddenly we were like politically, sociological movements at the Frankfurter Schule, but we look at art today more sociological as philosophical. So we say, what do the people want to have? And the art looks to that. Where's the need? Like business today. That is a little bit too much for us, but there are the general lines because art is today so different from before. Yes.
So I'm going to cut you off. I'm just going to explain a little bit about Patrizia Senretto before we'll move on to our various topics of discussion. So I have met Patrizia a number of times. I was recently in Madrid, where she has quite an extensive program. But basically, she started collecting, and it's interesting because I think collection, there's a sort of gene in people. They collect young. I mean, in your case, you started at 16, you bought something. It was later, Harald, but she was collecting pillboxes when she was a child, and she was already recording them in her exercise books. She said to me it was before we had the internet. So she started collecting then, but really the big revelation was when she went to England, and she knew Nicholas Logsdale from the Listen Gallery, and she went to Anish Kapoor's studio and to various others. So she obviously was connected already with the art world to an extent. She has an institution, or the Fondazione, a foundation in Turin, where she shows artworks. It's a building built by Claudio Silvestrin, who is the architect, where she shows not necessarily market darlings. You know, she's not somebody who shows Jeff Koons, for example, necessarily. She quite often chooses younger artists. She loves supporting younger artists. She does a lot of commissioning of artworks. She's told me that she had 100 commissions, 100 artworks that were commissioned, and I think you have also commissioned a lot of artworks as well. You can see an overview of her collecting in Florence at the Palazzo Strozzi. So if any of you are going to Florence, it's a good moment to see her collecting. She has a broad collection, and you have to remember when you look at it that a lot of the artists that we now know, like Maurizio Catalan, who are very well known, when she was buying them, they were much less known. So she was always going in a way against what was accepted at the time. She's also bought an island in Venice, and she's converting that into a place for exhibitions, for residencies, and it will hopefully, cross fingers, be open for the next Venice Biennale. So she is terribly sorry she can't be here. But I thought I would just tell you a little bit about her. She is a very dynamic person. Also collects costume jewelry from the 1950s. So I'd like to move on now to our questions. To an extent, you told us your motivations in starting your own collection was because you didn't actually find that public institutions were that interested.
This is not to do with public collections were not interesting. In the Netherlands, certainly not. The Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam was very front-running in those days. And no, it had much more to do with that I had the idea when I was young to become an artist. And I didn't. I did something completely differently. I studied chemistry, and I became, in my very younger years, I became a jet pilot in the Air Force, and had nothing to do with being an artist. But I was attracted to it, so I went to galleries, and I went in a certain stage also to visit the artists in their studios. And that made me more and more interesting, and or interested. And so slowly it happened. And at a certain time, I had started a chemical company. And we made, in the company, we made exhibitions out of the collection. Every year another exhibition in the offices. Well, we later found out that it was not an ideal place to do that. But we invited then clients and relations with the business. And most of the men did not like that so much. They loved football tickets. And the women liked to come. So I pleased the women because they enjoyed coming to see our exhibitions. As you realize that nowadays, in an average of museums, the majority of visitors is female. I don't know whether you're still allowed to say the difference between men and female, but the majority is female, and the majority of the majority is over 55. So you get basically older women. So I remember when I was chairman in Boymans, I always tried to explain to them what they should sell in their shop. They should sell little presents for the grandchildren. And we do that now in our shop, and we sell very good.
And that does well.
That helps, yes. It helps, I can tell you. And
so continue on just for a moment about your, because I think that at one point you were discussing, and in fact there was a donation to public institutions.
no, I didn't talk to public institutions. As a matter of fact, it was never a point for me until I turned old enough to say, what do you do with all this stuff? I had a whole storage full with art, and I could not hang it anywhere altogether or not even in parts. So, and then after this exhibition in the Kunsthal, we decided, let's have our own exhibition space. We didn't dare to call it a museum. And then we started to, we went on a search to get the right spot for it. That was not so easy, because first I thought I made my money from Rotterdam. Our factories are in Rotterdam, and at least the first factories. And I thought Rotterdam is the right place to do it. And I lived in Rotterdam at the time, and I tried, I discussed with the mayor, but the mayor was not very interested. And I asked him, give me a spot in the city and I will build you a museum. And I had even, he asked me, where do you want? And I gave him, obviously for him, two difficult spots. I said, give me 1 hectare in the park so that I can look over the waterway. And that was impossible. At the end, I got somewhere, backyard, a little spot, but I said, there I do not want. Same thing happened in The Hague. I was born in The Hague, so I thought The Hague is maybe also a good possibility. And there again, they put me somewhere back where there was no fun to do. And then I realized at a certain time that I lived in Wassenaar, close to The Hague, and there was an estate opposite our house. And that belonged to the state, to the telephone company. And they wanted to get rid of it, I found out. So I made them an offer, and it would be too long for you to hear the story about the offer, but it was a funny story. And it took a year discussion, but then I had the space, which doesn't mean that you have the permission to build, because it's considered nature, and you have to do a lot of things to get, well, I think in most European countries, not just in our country, it costs you a lot of investigations. We had to do 21 investigations to get the permission. We were lucky enough to get a permission, and we were able to build. Today, I think I would not get the permission, nor would I get the permission to build, because of NH3 or whatever, CO2. It's very difficult nowadays. So we were lucky that we could build, and we built the museum in 3 years' time.
The land is yours.
We bought the 100 acres land. And, well, mine is not true, because I donated it all to the foundation. But at that moment, it was mine, yes.
Right. But now it's in the hands of a foundation.
Yes. I immediately grounded the foundation with a serious board. And, sorry. And...
Can we have some more water, please?
We founded the foundation, and later we founded also an endowment foundation to provide money to buy art, not to run the museum.
Okay, we'll stop you there, because
Good.
The endowment I'd like to come back to. And Harald,
To add something about
please
it.
do.
I think this story I understand it perfectly, and so I don't have to repeat it. I only say one fact. Since I discussed with the town of Hamburg about this in this institution, and he's totally right, Joop. Naturally, this part of the real museum men want to have works or work parts of the collection or whatsoever. There's always interest, but one has to understand that they are dependent on the politicians. That is important. And since 2004,
Thank you.
2004, that are now, for how many years?
2004, 18, 19 years.
18 years, I've had 7 different persons responsible for culture in Hamburg.
Yeah.
That means every 3 years another one. And one puts it into the depot, the other wants to do that, and then the other is nearly political and says, oh, all this shit doesn't interest me, and independent of the quality. And these are the facts we have to fight with. And that means when I have a real collection, I say a collection which I try to build up, that I had a certain red line, because you should be, if you start new with collecting art, it's a good thing to buy young art and to develop yourself with good artists step by step, making all kinds of faults in between. Yes, but if you do that, you see, you have a responsibility for the artist. I don't see so much the responsibility of my collection to my family or to me. I'm 80 years old, spirit, but I have made a pledgement with the artist. I show their works, independent, different from the collections of the museums, where they're only shown every 3 years, a part of them. Yes, for instance, that is a big difference, and therefore, if the politics are so that they don't have any money to buy art, and that is sincere so, they don't have any politics to make politics to secure art as a collection, and they even don't have money for the exhibitions. They are dependent on money, on supporters. Yes? Then there is a clear natural line to do it by yourself. That is how should you care for your ideas? And I think I want to follow my ideas, and this I wanted to add to what you said. Yes, because it's a political question, very much so.
So that,
7, and in England you must have around 10 different persons.
Oh, we have had this.
8 in the last 6 years.
We had 8. It's a revolving door.
Correct.
We've had 8 culture secretaries in 5 years. I think it's disaster.
How can you make a
you can't,
good collection
it's a disaster,
with that?
Yes.
It's impossible.
But unfortunately, the culture is not respected in England. But that's another.
Is it
It's
true?
not the subject.
Remember, England is a disaster.
Brexit
is a disaster. But
Brexit.
anyway,
No,
don't go
no.
down
It's
there.
okay.
Let's not go down that. It's not our topic today.
No, I just wanted to add that.
But I think that this adds into perhaps another of the questions that I wanted to ask both of you, and I think to an extent you've answered it, the challenges of having your own collection. So dealing with the local politicians, the local administration is one of the big challenges, is that right?
Yeah, local or international, that's all the same. They don't have any more money, also not in the United States. So they gave up, look for years ago, they gave up to make their exhibitions according to the canon of art. If you have the canon of art here on the DEFAF, this is a real canon. So when I collect young art and modern, contemporary, I always have to look for old art. You cannot see etwas new without knowing the old, and you cannot see the old in the present against and view also the future. So you're always oscillating, change between past, present, and future. If you make good decisions for art, and that is the point that you cannot do if you are only three years in a job and want to make a political career out of it. So impossible.
Challenges. Do you?
Well, it was building the museum is a challenge, because We built it grassroots on this very nice estate that is there since somewhere 1500s and called Voorlinden. And but the difficulty was getting the permit. Took us 2 years, and everybody says that was awfully fast. The municipality was helping me. The mayor was an art lover, so I was lucky. That helps a lot. Otherwise, it would never have happened. I must say that. So I had quite a lot of help, although the laws are so difficult. So to get this permit, funny thing is, at least in my country, funny thing is, once you have the permit, once it's there and they say, we allow you to build, nobody will look after you anymore. So it's okay. Nobody comes to control whether you really do it.
Really?
Yes. You have to
That's
cut.
extraordinary.
I had to cut a few trees, and they said I had to put another 100 trees up, new trees, and nobody ever came to see whether I did it or not. It's only all these investigations, 21 in our case, of the most strange animals I had never heard of, and yes, the striped frog. Yeah.
Oh, because for the animal life, you mean?
Yes,
Oh,
the
dear.
rough back
Oh, yes.
bat. I have never heard of that bat,
crested
but you
newts.
should not find it.
Bats and crested newts in England.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely important.
The
But
funny
anyway.
thing with the bats was,
Yes.
the guy, that you had a bat association
Yes.
in Wassenaar. Wassenaar is a very small community of 27,000 inhabitants. And the guy, a young guy, said, I am the chairman of the Bat Foundation. And I found out that he was also the director and the whole personnel. He was alone. And he said, I will do the investigation. Since the municipality said, he's the bat expert. Okay. So he came to me and he said, do you want to find these bats? I said, well, I have the impression that I better don't find them. He said, yes, that is possible. They're everywhere bats. And he said, well, my foundation is not very good with the money at the time. We are a little bit short of cash. So for 5,000, I won't find you the bats.
Seriously?
And now I confess, I paid.
Yes. And,
I paid.
And he didn't find any bats?
He didn't find any
Amazing.
bats. But for 5,000, cheaper I couldn't get it. And if he had found the bats, and they are all around, then I would have a big problem. Bats are more important than people.
Oh, dear, oh, dear. Anyway, listen, we must move on because we could
Go
stay
ahead.
and talk about bats and crested newts for a long
yes,
time, but
yes.
I think that we have to move on. And the next question I wanted to ask both of you is, when you have your own private collection, you have it at home, perhaps some in storage, that's one thing. But once you make a public collection that the public will visit, they will see it, does that change what you choose, what you select?
That has a great influence, especially if you deal with young art, which is not yet accepted or on the way to be accepted. Then it is good to have the criticism from outside, because you are not only inside yourself. You should be open for critics always, and that is the point. So the first advantage is that the artists are shown. And they have this discourse with others, and also me. And so, if you just collect for yourself, this is another kind of collection, which is absolutely okay. I don't say that's not okay, but especially if you deal with art which is socialized with the political movements in the society, as we have it today, in many respects, then it should better be open and public.
You're saying
To
yes,
say
when
it
you
simple.
show
Yes.
to the public
Yes.
that it changes what you're selecting to
Yeah,
exhibit.
the art is always a mirror of the society to some
Yes.
extent.
Yes.
And this is here, if if I make it short, I like the word of de Kooning, who was always asked, why did you make art? And they refused. Artists don't like to say something about their art. He just said this famous sentence, it's all about freedom. Right. This is a good sentence. And what you see here in TEFAF, it's all about freedom. Some collect this, other collect that, and therefore I like this TEFAF exhibition here. Although I'm not interested in many of these things, but that is not the point.
But that's your freedom as well.
That's only my own point, my private point. Yes?
A little bit different approach. The answer is basically yes, it changes, but I found out I never wanted a museum. Really never. I can confess, I never wanted it. I thought there were enough. But at a certain stage, say as from around the year 2000, I think, I found that I bought pieces that could not be in my house, nor in the office, nor anywhere. And then the ultimate came in 2009. I bought this work of Richard Serra, which is 18 meters long, 4 meters high, and weighs 216 tons.
Yes.
And I had a spot where I could put it in the storage. And then I realized you have to do something. Why did you buy this? And I really was not buying it with the intention to put it in the museum.
Oh,
but then afterwards, it came as a logical thing.
It was a kind of opposition.
But
Maybe.
you haven't, that doesn't
I think you
answer
was
my
a little bit
question,
rebellious,
I don't think.
Joop,
No?
to buy Richard Serra such a big work.
My question was, once you've decided to make a museum, to put your collections on show to the public, does that change?
For me, no.
No.
The only advantage is if you have these bigger walls, that you can buy bigger art.
Yeah.
So that changes. So in the beginning, you look what can be above the couch. Yes. And well, this is how it happens. And can it go on the stairs? Whatever. That is the limit.
But it has also something to do with new development, especially with the Biennale and Triennale. If you look for Netherlands, for instance, the famous small works of Netherlands which fit into the houses which were small,
domestic,
the walls,
domestic
art.
Yes.
But you have here now the Biennale, the Triennale, the Venice, and everything, and they make huge works.
Yes.
And therefore, if you give a home to bigger works, you are naturally more in the trend of this. Yes, and many of these works which are shown in the Biennale and Triennale are destroyed afterwards. And I said to the artist, I have a big museum I don't like the museum as well.
Okay. You don't like the term.
Because I have
space.
other, but then I could say, I save it for you. And they were very lucky. Yes, I saved
they were
them for you.
happy because it had been saved, yes.
Serra doesn't go into one museum. We have a small Richard Serra in Hamburg. Little miniature Serra.
He has a bigger one.
Compared with your ones. Yes. You have an open air Serra.
No, in the museum.
In the museum. Okay.
We built the museum around it.
Okay. Okay. But I wanted to say this is very important that the whole shows out of, which is worldwide trends, we have nearly 150 Biennale and Triennale. And they are always big. It's different from the miniature of Netherlands art of the past. Yeah, very important.
Many changes. So now this is a delicate point that I'm going to raise. And I had a very funny conversation with you on the phone while we were preparing this. As you can imagine, because I said, how are you assuring the future? And I hardly dare pronounce your name. Joop?
Joop.
Joop?
Joop.
Joop said, do you mean when I die? And I didn't say anything, and he said, you should have said no at that point. So I missed the cue. But that is my question. What is the future for both of you? Perhaps you could start.
I had that question several times by the government, and by the municipality. What will happen afterwards when
Exactly.
when you're not there anymore?
No.
They call it when you're not there.
That's a
And
depot.
well, they are much not as friendly as you are. So they are tough, and they want to know. Not another museum that goes broke after the guy dies. So there's two things that happened, at least with our collection. I bought the estate, then we built the museum. There's an old house on the estate where we have the restaurant and the offices, and the estate is quite nice. It has dunes and it has water and it has wonderful park trees and so on.
But no bats.
And animals?
And bats and cows, and we have all kinds of animals, deer. It's nice.
Oh dear,
And,
oh dear.
oh dear, yes. And then, I realized when I had built it, what do we go and do afterwards when you're not there anymore? So I decided to give it to the foundation. That was quite a difficult thing to do because it's all kinds of. It was in a company, the Caldenborgh Collection BV, which is a company, and it had to go from the company to the foundation, and that has to do with a lot of tax. And they wanted to value how much is the collection worth, how much is the estate worth, what did you pay for the building of the museum? Because in Holland, well, most people here are from this beautiful country. They know for everything you have to pay taxes, like in most countries, I think. We always complaining, we Dutch, but I think in other countries it is not necessarily better. And but in that case, I discussed with high-level politicians and tax people. They helped me a lot. I could give it all away without paying any tax. So I had to first to transfer it to me personally. It was in this company, to me personally. Then personally, I could give it within 5 years' time. And that happened. And at the same time, when we did this grant, we also made this other foundation, what I call the endowment fund. The endowment fund has quite a nice number of euros, and they do invest that. And what comes out of the investment goes, and it's also a foundation, so they don't pay taxes, goes to the Voorlinden Museum. And the Voorlinden Museum is allowed to buy art from that. They're not allowed to run the museum with it.
Right. But then you have tickets and so on that covers that.
That was another question. So I don't want to now answer the other question.
I know that I'm aware of the time,
The
so I'm going to
future-
ask
the
Harald
future
as
is
well
also-
about the future.
the future is a good
because we
question.
want to be able to take some questions as well.
But the future is a good question. That depends a lot internationally by the tax laws.
Yes.
And we have different tax laws in the United States, for instance, where you can deduct everything, more or less, to some extent. We have different laws in Germany, where you can give it to the next generation under some conditions without paying any taxes, inheritance taxes. So it depends a lot what you do with that. Personally, I think that a collection can only survive if there is a person who is behind this collection. Mm-hmm. If there is no one, if my children do not want that, then it would be a very good way to bring the artworks to people like here on a show, that people who are interested in these works have these works. That's much better than if you go into your own grave, that your artworks go into the depot of the museums. Mm. Yeah, mm-hmm. Then I would much prefer that they come between the people again,
so
and they organize themselves.
Go back to collecting.
That is my philosophy, and it depends whether you are religious or not. You see a very good sentence I like. I'm not so religious, I must confess. Of Georg Kreisler, he said he was asked when he was 87 whether he would like to have a life after his death. He said, "I'm not a pessimist."
So, thank you. I think you've had a wonderful time. I certainly have had a very good time. And I think the reason we've all had such a good time because we had such excellent speakers. So I'd like you to clap them really strongly.